am filming this in the early morning hours of September 11th, and it's been about 10 hours since I found out that Charlie Kirk was murdered. He was engaged in a gun debate when he was shot in the neck. From some of the videos I saw of the crowd kind of dispersing in panic, I sort of thought that maybe the shooter was actually someone who was in the crowd off to the side. It turns out that the bullet actually came from a high-powered rifle. So this was a sniper in a building situation. I'm not talking about anybody's legal rights. People have a legal right to say all kinds of awful things, and I support that. But on a moral level, like, what's acceptable to express? Where's the line? And before I go any further, I just want to say, when there's a breaking news story like this, please be careful what you're sharing on social media. There was someone who was arrested initially that was considered the prime suspect for this shooting. He turned out to be innocent, but not before his identity was all over social media, and right-wingers were jumping on the fact that this was a Democrat and making this whole thing about that. Like, you could ruin someone's life that way. I get that this was a very shocking moment, and this is a very emotional time for a lot of people, but please just let all the facts come in before you just pile on. Also, speaking of what we share on social media, please stop sharing the video of his murder. I understand when it was breaking news. I understand I don't pass judgment on someone who kind of shared it thoughtlessly, but now that it is official that he has passed, it is not too late to go down and take that down from your social media. This is not something that needs to be out there in the public to see. We all know what happened. There is an ongoing investigation. It is what it is. But anyone who is keeping those videos up for the sake of clout and engagement, that is really gross. Now, getting to some of the conversations that are surrounding this shooting. A lot of prominent Democrats have come out and condemned this violence, as they should. I have not seen anything from elected officials or from left-leaning political commentators that has been questionable or disrespectful or derogatory, but comment sections are filled with their supporters. And one thing the left loves to do is suggest that all of the vitriol and bitterness and hate is on the right side of politics. And I think this is a great example that that's just not true. I'm not saying that the right is innocent by any means. They can be very aggressive and hateful and bitter. And I do think that the Republicans are far worse than the Democrats. The amount of crap the Democrats would have to commit to be even close to being as awful as the Republicans, for me, would be a lot. So if we were to go issue by issue, yes, I would absolutely side with Democrat policies over Republicans on a lot of things. But there is still a lot of really gross behavior in a lot of left-leaning people. Leftist politics is not free from vitriol, and anyone who tells you otherwise is selling you something. For example, a couple of years ago, I made a comment on a video posted by NBC News. It was a very stupid and ill-informed comment. I watched about half the clip and had a knee-jerk reaction, and if I'd watched the whole clip, I would have realized why my comment was stupid. But anyways, long story short, I made it sound like I was supporting Trump, like I was a Trump supporter, which I am obviously not. I get off Facebook, I put my phone down, I don't think anything of it, I come back later, and I have 900 replies. Which, first of all, most of my social media stuff does not get much engagement. I am not used to that many eyeballs on me over one comment. But second of all, like, these were incredibly hateful comments. I can get over someone calling me dumb, like, especially if it's clearly pointed out to me why what I said was dumb. That I can deal with. But there was so much derogatory language and so much vitriol and so much hatefulness, and it was just absolutely insane. It is ridiculous to face that much hatefulness over a comment, whether it was a stupid comment or not. And there were at least 3 comments, I remember, that insinuated that I was too stupid to live and should just off myself. And you know what? I just want to point out, not everyone can read comments like that and just put their phone down and move on about their day. You really need to be careful about saying something that aggressive to somebody. So don't tell me that all of the hate comes exclusively from right-wingers. I went through and read a lot of comments under these posts about Charlie Kirk's death, and there were a few comments that were just kind of the most common that I'm going to go through. What goes around comes around. So Charlie has been a gun rights advocate for the duration of his career. That is not the equivalent of picking up a gun and shooting innocent people. So what is it that's coming back around? I understand that this is an emotional issue, especially for people who have lost somebody in a shooting, and I'm not trying to be dismissive of that. But to act like Charlie has done anything that's remotely the equivalent of that, just because he says things you don't like, is not sane, for one thing. but it's also a really gross thing to express. He wasn't a hero or a martyr, he was a cause. Well, in terms of his legacy, I guess you can kind of say that. I know you mean it as an insult. It's probably more of a compliment to his work, really. And in the end, he did kind of die for his cause, so in a way, he is a martyr. The best news I've heard all day. How are you living your life? In all seriousness, if finding out that Charlie Kirk was murdered brightens your day. And I think with those on the left who engage in this kind of rhetoric, it's really just a total lack of introspection. And part of me gets it because you're so focused on what the other side is doing and actively criticizing that and fighting back against that. And I support all of that. I do, but it really is okay to take a step back and think about what you're doing as well. I won't be losing any sleep. No one said you have to. No one says you have to. I don't believe in telling other people how to feel, so I am not going to sit here and lecture you on how you should feel about this event. And if you do feel happy that Charlie Kirk was murdered, I'm not going to tell you that you shouldn't. But you also don't have to go to a post about someone's murder and go, well, doesn't bother me. Couldn't have happened to a better guy. If he had more class like you, would he still be alive? I'm floored by these reactions. I'm floored by my own response. I actually cried on the way home from work once it kind of settled with me. I never would have thought that would be my reaction. I relate so much to people who are upset about Donald Trump being in office. I relate so much to people who feel hatefulness towards people like Charlie Kirk because they empowered people like Donald Trump, because certain groups are being targeted by the current administration. So politically, I do align with a lot of the frustrations that people who are expressing these things are feeling. I think in a lot of ways it's a good thing to be angry at racism and white supremacy and misogyny, but we can do that and call those things out without dancing on somebody's grave. He doesn't even have a grave yet, by the way. Like, it's that soon. It has not even been 24 hours yet, at least as of filming this. So I am more than willing to criticize a lot of the response that we're seeing to this from average left-wing folks, but I am also very much frustrated with the right wing right now for a couple of reasons. Now, Charlie Kirk was a professional political commentator. He was not just someone who, had a YouTube channel at home like I do, and he was very involved. He worked closely with the president. He started Turning Point USA. He's worked with a lot of other prominent paid political commentators. So this really impacts the whole world of paid political commentary. And they're going to have emotional reactions too. And I get that. I understand that this was shocking, and I understand that a lot of people unintentionally viewed footage that was very graphic that showed essentially the moment he died. But one of the common themes that I'm seeing, just from regular folks and from the paid political commentators, is how can this happen in America? Just save it. Just fucking spare me. Just fucking spare me, please. Do not have a casual, shoulder shrug attitude about it when 10 kids are killed in a school and then be angry and offended when someone you like is shot. I just don't want to hear it. I just don't want to hear it. And I also just cannot grasp, or don't want to grasp, maybe, this bizarre right-wing American patriot vision that America is this fairy tale, idealistic place where bad things don't happen. I just can't get on board with that fairy tale. I don't know what y'all are smoking. Shootings happen in this country all the time. I am sorry that someone that you care about was the victim of that. But to act like the concept of shootings is a foreign concept to you, when Charlie and many of yourselves have spent so much time talking about it, really? We are a very violent country. We are an extremely violent country. And yes, people should be able to express their beliefs without fear of being shot. Absolutely on board with that point. But how many people are killed on a regular basis, going about their lives, doing totally non-controversial things, minding their own business? Like, from a free speech perspective, yes, I want people to be able to say what they want to say without fear of being shot, but what makes a political commentator more important than the rest of us? What about the safety of everyday Americans? Y'all don't really want to have a conversation about that, and when you do, it's pretty much just this shoulder shrug attitude. And you know what? There's not an easy solution. The left talks like, if you pass this gun control law or this gun control law, there will never be shootings again. And I don't think that's real. I think there's more we can do. I think we can minimize the problem to an extent, but anyone who thinks that we can just completely eliminate the problem by passing a single big law is not being realistic, in my opinion. But stop acting like it's so shocking. And it's not just this Charlie Kirk story. And I think what bothers me the most when a shooting happens is some polished little politician getting on camera or going on their phone and tweeting, "This is not who we are." Yes, it is. I know you don't want to hear that. I know it's a little bit uncomfortable, but that is exactly who we are. This is the country we chose to have. Gun manufacturers profit off of school shootings. That's the country we have. Stocks for gun companies went up when news of Charlie Kirk's death broke. That is the country we have shootings all the time, and we are so addicted to guns that gun manufacturers profit when American people die. You can sit there and not like it all you want to, but you don't get to just stick your head in the sand and pretend that's not the country we have. I'm sorry, but it is. Another thing we need to talk about is the blame game. Now, when it comes to the paid political commentators, I have not heard them doing this just yet. I'm sure for some of them it's coming, but a lot of y'all right-wingers in the comment sections are blaming Democrats in general. This is the same playbook we went through after Trump's assassination attempt. The Democrats were to blame. Not the shooter. Let's not place blame where it belongs. Let's not place blame on the shooter. No, just all Democrats are to blame. Unacceptable rhetoric. I hate Donald Trump. I despise him. I think he may be one of the worst things that has ever happened to this country. I am so embarrassed that this country is so stupid that we would give him power. I had nothing to do, and will not have anything to do, with anything meant to harm him. And to suggest that I would be in any way complicit with that just because I have different opinions is disgusting. Speaking of President Trump, he came out and said that Democrats were to blame for Charlie Kirk's death. We don't even know who the shooter is yet. What an irresponsible thing to do. Donald Trump is not a responsible person. I don't expect him to act like an adult. I don't. But that's the point. That's why he shouldn't be in office. It is completely normal for him to throw out baseless accusations and his supporters just eat it up and find it acceptable. That's ridiculous. And then, of course, we got all these folks saying, "Oh, Democrats use rhetoric that incites violence." Okay, pop quiz. What do Trump supporters do when they are told that their rhetoric can incite violence? Do they A, change course? Or do they B, double down? B, they double down. All the time, every time. I'm not saying we shouldn't think about our words and whether or not they would impact other people to do violent things. Of course, that's something we should think about. Of course, that's a conversation to have. But Trump supporters don't care whether or not their words incite violence. Y'all have no room to speak. And then, of course, there's the divisiveness. I'm hearing a lot of people talk about how divided we are as a country. Yes, we are very divided as a country. Trump supporters don't need to be speaking on that. You supported Trump because he's divisive. You liked Trump because he's divisive. You supported things like him denying life-saving aid to blue states. So I don't really want to hear from y'all about how divisive Democrat rhetoric is. Other verbiage that's being criticized is people quoting Charlie Kirk saying that we basically have to accept gun violence for the sake of the Second Amendment being preserved. Why should we censor who Charlie Kirk was and rewrite history so that his legacy looks a little bit better than it actually was? I'm not interested in doing that. Now, sure, I guess you could say people could have waited 24 hours, 48 hours to start bringing up that quote. But he has said, and he's repeated the sentiment in many other ways, that we need to essentially accept some gun deaths every single year in order to maintain the Second Amendment. That's what he said. I don't know what to tell you. If you have a problem with the man being quoted, then maybe his legacy isn't as good as you're claiming it is. And if that's really something he thought was okay, then what is so wrong with bringing up things he said about gun deaths after his gun death? He became part of a group that he argued was necessary for the freedoms of the United States of America. And if you don't agree with people saying that and using that quote, then how much of his ideology did you really support? Now, we can't do anything about having a divisive president. We can't do anything about our politics being this divided. But as individuals, we can make a choice to not allow people, whether they're political commentators or not, to determine how we live our lives and what type of people we become. And I happened to be scrolling on Facebook a couple of hours ago, and I came across this quote that I thought was just the perfect representation of what I'm thinking now that I've had time to process and I've spoken about the things that I criticize in the response to this shooting from the left and from the right. Don't stop being a good person because of bad people. I just feel like somehow that ties into this story. I think what matters most is not letting people we disagree with bring out the worst in us. Like, it's not a bad thing to be opinionated. It's not a bad thing to be passionate. It's not a bad thing to talk about things you care about. It's not a bad thing to have discussions with people you disagree with. It's not a bad thing to speak truth to power. It's not a bad thing to commit to telling the truth regardless of what anyone else thinks about it or considers it offensive. But how, especially in a time this divided, especially when so many of us are scared for the future, whether you think that the Democrats are going to take back the White House and destroy this country, whether you think Trump is going to continue destroying this country, regardless of where you stand, we live in very frustrating, divided, and scary times. So how do you go through all of that? And how do you have these conversations without completely losing yourself? And that is something that has kind of subconsciously, I guess, been on my mind for quite a while. I guess now is as good a time as any to wrap up this video, but at the end of the day, this was just a tragedy.